Well, we're going to be talking with Congressman Ron Paul. Now, you know, this is kind of fun. I've always been a great, I respect Congressman Paul greatly. No one has been more diligent in his efforts to bring fiscal sanity to Washington, D.C., and to restore this constitutional republic in all necessary forms. And what's great fun as well for me is to see his son as one of the standout stars as a freshman in the United States Senate, with whom I spoke last night on Lou Dobbs Tonight. So we're delighted to welcome back to the broadcast one of the most respected members of Congress, Congressman Ron Paul, current candidate for the Republican presidential nomination. And Congressman Paul, great to have you back with us here.
Thank you, Lou. Good to be with you.
Let's start with cut, cap, and balance. I was just talking to the audience about your diligence, your vitality over all these years in trying to bring fiscal sensibility and sanity to Washington, D.C. Why vote against cut, cap, and balance?
Because it raised the national debt. I mean, that was the most important reason. It raised it by $2.4 trillion. Mm-hmm. My question is how can you solve the problem of too much debt by raising the debt limit? I understood the other arguments. Well, this is a step in the right direction. This is, an effort to cut, and we're going to have this constitutional amendment. But see, I haven't accepted this argument that cuts 5 and 10 years out and a constitutional amendment might take a couple years solves the problem of spending. And the only thing we can be responsible for is this coming year's budget.
Right.
So it'll be another Congress, later on, and they have no obligation to live up to anything that we do. So I just think the problem is so serious that we have to deal with it. And if you raise the debt limit, nothing significant has been done, and I want them to face up to the fact that we're spending too much money.
I don't know if you've seen the number of websites, news organizations that they have up on their home pages, Wall Street preparing for Armageddon, trying to figure out, what's going to transpire. But Wall Street firms, suddenly Wall Street firms are a great concern for the liberal mainstream media, Congressman, and they want these Wall Street firms to be prepared if there's default on August 2nd. What are your thoughts?
Well, I don't know. You might be a better person to even ask that question, too, because from my viewpoint of just looking at the markets don't seem to be all that disturbed. If they really expected a default on August 2nd, wouldn't you expect it to be a little bit more disruptive and maybe interest rates going up a little bit more than they have? So I don't think that's going to happen, because I personally, just from being around here for a little while, I'm betting that there's not going to be the default that they're talking about where the checks aren't going to go out. Big governments and big countries never do that. They always default by sending out checks with less value in them, and they default, through the depreciation of money. And of course, that I've been talking about that for a long time. I think they'll depreciate the money over and above this idea that they'll default. But I do absolutely believe the debt is unsustainable. We can't pay it down. Debt has to be liquidated, and it's agonizing to do that, and that's why the debt really hasn't been, it's gone up rather than a lot of that debt should have been liquidated over these last 3 years. The people who ran up that debt, we shouldn't have bailed them out. That part of the debt should have been liquidated rather than putting it onto the taxpayer.
Man, did we put something on our back to save a lot of folks who, frankly, weren't worth the effort.
Right.
It's incredible.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about the plans to raise the debt ceiling, because there's been a noticeable, dramatic shift in Washington from whether the debt ceiling should be raised or whether it shouldn't, to across the board now. I mean, there's one plan trying to outdo the other's plan every day.
Right.
Whether it's the president's, he was going to have a grand bargain. Vice President Biden was going to lead that small group of bipartisan geniuses forward, and they're going to come up with a solution. Then there's the Gang of Six, which Tom Coburn made the Gang of Five, and then somebody made into a Gang of Six. Then we had cut, cap, and balance, which is the gang of 234, which is the only legislation that has been voted on and passed that would actually raise the debt ceiling with conditions. What do you make of all of this?
I think it's political grandstanding. People are, going to the wire to see who's going to get blamed and who's going to maintain power and who's going to win the next election. I think deep down in their heart they know that somebody's going to give, and it's not going to, they're not going to go past that day. I think this is exactly what we did for so long on a continuing resolution.
Yeah.
We knew they would finally come up with something, but it was always a blame game. Who can be blamed for the problem? And both sides play that, and it's power and blame, and I think that's what they're doing. There for a while, the last day or two, we were told, just hang around, you're going to be possibly voting Saturday and Sunday. But then today they said, no, there won't be any votes. So it's all this maneuvering. They never told us what we might be voting on. but evidently the solution isn't there. But I think this August 2nd date, not that I'm a cynic at all, but August 2nd is about that time, the summer break is coming, and there's a lot of trips planned. And that's one thing that they tend to agree on. We can't.
And some of those trips are campaign trips, right, Congressman?
Yeah, some people do campaigning, but some people like to go around the world too and take their families with them.
I understand. And Senator Harry Reid's just mad as heck at you guys for taking the weekend off. I mean, he is furious with you. He doesn't consider you guys to be, well, in his class when it comes to being a committed legislator.
Well, I hope he doesn't take it out on me. Maybe he can pick on a senator over there and let him take care of me.
Well, you got one senator. My guess is you'd be looking for an exemption for on that.
Yeah, but I've come around to believing he can handle himself pretty well.
Yeah, last night I asked him on my show about he supports cut, cap, and balance. You don't. I said, how are you, how's that working? And he handled that, as you would guess, with great aplomb and sophistication and elevated you both at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I always worried about it, how fathers would, that there will be a time and we'll have, some disagreement. And I always thought, well, that might make him uncomfortable. But in a way, I think it says that we're two different people.
Yep.
And most people recognize that our goals are identical, but it's also tactically we might have a disagreement on how we're trying to get to a certain goal. And certainly the process up here is rather complex. And what we've been talking about are the tactics and the procedures and how we're trying to get there. And I probably just have a different viewpoint than he did on this matter.
Well, and I think it's to both your credit that your son, as a freshman senator, has shown so much leadership, and also manages to, when he disagrees, he manages to elevate those with whom he disagrees. I mean, that bodes well. As we say out in Texas, that fellow bears watching. So how do you think Speaker Boehner has done so far?
Well, strictly, and I told him this the other day after I had made the announcement I wouldn't be running for Congress. He came up and talked to me. He was very polite. And I told him, I said, your politics and mine, we haven't been in agreement all that often because he likes more government than I do. Mm-hmm. I said, you really have run this place better than anybody else since I've been here. So he has a manager of people and the management of the way the floor is run. Yeah. I mean, he has done a very good job, and I think he's very sincere in trying to work this out. He just has, a different understanding about the role of government, and I understand that because my ideas on the role of government is pretty minimal. How little government I want.
Right.
But I think he's a gentleman and has done his best he can. But I don't think he has the solutions there either at his hand. But I sort of like the way he's managed the affairs of the House floor.
Yeah, I was interested to hear what you would say, because Boehner has, I'm going to be straight up, he's surprised me because he's shown the guts and the principle to hold up the Paul Ryan plan. I know that you're not a fan, but I happen to think that was so much farther a reach for John Boehner. Mm-hmm. Than I would have ever expected him to stand up to. He advanced it. He has really, I just shown a lot more backbone in this contest than I ever expected.
Yeah. And, in that position, a person like myself wouldn't be very good in a position like that. His job is try to keep things moving along. So I see his job as a little bit different. Sort of like if you're in a political party, the chairman of the party has a different responsibility than somebody running for Congress or somebody voting in Congress. I think the responsibilities are completely different.
So how do we resolve this, and how soon?
Well,
if we do.
I think they'll have. I predict that they will raise the debt limit temporarily. Maybe enough to get us by another month or so. Let the trips go about, and maybe let the tone change a little bit. But eventually there'll be some agreement to raise it. Maybe they'll do it every 2 months or so, just to keep things going, and they'll go back to the old-fashioned default, print up the money, and lower the real debt through the devaluation of the currency, which will be much, much worse. I would rather them face up to the fact and cut the spending, because what can happen when you have a lot of inflation. People get very, very angry. And the price inflation right now is much higher than they admit to. Right. It's probably well over 9% according to some private free market economists. And this is what devastates people, because the people that are on fixed retirements and Social Security, when you raise their cost of living, it really hurts. This is one thing about that Gang of Six program. They're going to change the CPI calculation again, and I think that is so deceitful. So they're cutting it, but in a deceitful manner, and they won't have to pay out as much. But it's still cut, and the people are going to be unhappy, and they're already noticing the packages are getting smaller and prices are going up. And
they've been locked down there for 4 years now.
Yeah.
And people, and you, Congressman, I'm being absolutely serious. You're the only elected official I've talked with this year who's referenced retirees, older folks who are dependent on fixed income, reference their economic travails, because they're looking at no return on savings if they are fortunate enough to have it. They have no prospect of that changing, and they are the last consideration.
Yeah. I've brought that subject up both to Greenspan and Bernanke, and they dismissed it both times because they have a lot to say about interest rates and what CDs get. Mm-hmm. And, of course, they look at the picture and say, well, you have to have low interest rates to benefit the banks and, keep the economy and Wall Street going. I said, yeah, but what about the savers who are trying to take care of themselves and they make 1%? If you had a market rate of interest, they might get 6 or 7%, and so you're really cheating them. So the whole system has not been protective of the elderly,
right?
And yet there will not be, the checks won't be cut honestly. What they're going to do is lower it by giving them money that has less value and make sure they can't earn any interest on their savings.
Yeah, Mr. Bernanke and Mr. Greenspan have forgotten a truism of banking. Is you don't make the money on the number, you make the number on the spread. Mm-hmm. And but anyway, we've got
the banks are doing pretty good right now.
Yeah, they are. It's a heck of a business to be in, isn't it?
Maybe we're in the wrong business.
Well, and have been for a very long time. Bankers are in the right business.
Yeah, but I couldn't sleep at night if I was making money doing that. I would have trouble with my conscience.
Yeah, you and me both. And by the way, I'd get bored to tears.
Yeah.
So, anyway, and I know you would as well. Congressman, it's always great to talk with you. Thank you for being here.
Lou. Good to talk to you.
Wish you all the best. Congressman Ron Paul, Republican candidate for the presidential nomination. We're coming right back with your calls, your views, your thoughts.